Okay guys, strap in. This could be a bit of a rough one.
Hold on to your butts.
Today we're taking a look at another top 5 units, and this time, yep, it is for the Drukhari. The Drukhari are, now let's be fair, they have won a few events since 10th edition dropped. Scourges is doing reasonably well with a few lists at the moment, as are a few other people. But let's be honest, for the most part, they're doing badly. Really, really badly at the moment. So this list may well be quite tough. Most of the things in it you may look at and be like, okay, but this unit from my army is just better or cheaper or more useful or has better support or all of the above. And then on top of that, you have to take into account that the Drukhari army rule and detachment rule are both really quite mediocre. Pain tokens as an idea are fine, I think, but I just think it's not enough. Being able to give a unit rerolls on their advance or charge or hit rolls is nice, but they are very limited, and even with the bonus pain points that you get from the detachment, it's still just nowhere near as good as, say, even the new nerfed version of Oath of Moment, let alone things like Fate Dice, or even things like the Astra Militarum orders, all of which I think are better than the Drukhari detachment rules. And I think, to be honest, the detachment rule especially is particularly insulting because at best it grants you 3 extra turns of a reroll to charge, hit, or advance, but it comes at the cost of forcing you to take 3 HQ options, one of which is quite awful, and the other 2, whilst they're decent and good, you're still forced to take them to actually get a benefit from your detachment rule, which just to me feels like a bit of a kick in the teeth. But enough of the rant, we will take what we can get. This is, as I said, going to be another 5 units from the Drukhari Index that if I was being forced to put together some kind of strong competitive list, I would probably be looking at including. So let's start off, and in the number 5 spot we have a unit of Scourges. A squad of 5 is 110 points, so 22 points per model, and whilst you don't get a super defensive stat line, they are only toughness 3 with a 4-up save and a 5-up in run and 1 wound, they do have a great amount of movement. They are 14 inches, which is more than most armies' biker units, and they have even more solid mobility in their winged strike rule, which allows them to move after they've shot, so they can move out or deep strike, shoot into an enemy, and then duck behind cover again to keep them safe. The reason I would be taking them in a list though is because they have a really genuinely solid selection of weapons. They are basically your heavy hitters when it comes to ranged firepower. They each come with a shard carbine, but up to 4 out of the 5 can instead swap that out for a blaster, a dark lance, a haywire blaster, a heat lance, a shredder, or a splinter cannon, so they do have a lot of choice. The Dark Lances are of course great, bringing you some solid strength 12, minus 3 AP, d6 plus 2 damage that hits on 3s when they stay still, whilst the Splinter Cannon is great if you want to take out Marines. It brings an anti-infantry 3+ profile with sustained hits 1 and 3 shots at minus 1 AP and 2 damage. The Scourges really can be kitted out for most situations, which is really good. If I wanted some anti-vehicle, I would probably go for the Dark Lance or the Haywire Blaster, which is in itself incredibly potent. It's got anti-vehicle 4+ and devastating wounds, so netting you 3 unsavable damage per shot on a 4+ to wound. The Blaster is also reasonably solid. It's a good anti-elite, anti-light vehicle option. Each of them brings you a strength 8, minus 4 AP, d6 plus 1 damage shot with assault. It really is just a unit all round that can be kitted out for most situations, and with Deep Strike you can really get them where you need them to be very, very easily. They are cheap enough to almost be a bit of a suicide unit where you drop them in. You can drop them in, hope to take out a big squad of Marines or a vehicle or whatever it is you've kitted them out to take out, and then move them 6 inches after they've shot to get out of line of sight, or just to, maybe get away from an impending charge or steal an objective that your opponent may not have protected well enough. They are just useful. They are flimsy, yes, but you can get a couple of turns of brutal shooting out of them, and then just be sort of a thorn in your opponent's side unless they deal with them. So for 110 points, I think that makes them a very worthwhile investment. The next unit I would look to include is, you guessed it, more ranged firepower, and a good way to bring that for another relatively cheap 115 points is in the Riveger. This is essentially the main battle tank of the Drukhari, and it comes with a toughness 9, 11 wound profile with a 4-up save and a 6-up invuln. So yes, a gladiator battle tank or an Eldari fire prism this isn't, but this is Drukhari, we'll take what we can get. Again, you get a solid move with 14 inches and access to some rerolls in the ability Eradicate the Foe. What this does is it grants you reroll hit rolls of 1 when you are shooting at a target that is at its starting strength. So as long as a unit hasn't lost any models or against a vehicle that is still at its full wounds value, you will get to reroll hit rolls of 1. Now yes, reroll hit rolls of 1 isn't the strongest rule out there, but it does help somewhat when you look at the 3 Dark Lances that the Riveger is equipped with. They're only 1 shot each and they do hit on 3s, so those rerolls of 1 will sometimes be a really big factor, and then from that you get strength 12, minus 3 AP, and d6 plus 2 damage per shot. So 3 of these going into something like a gladiator tank will on average do around 7 or 8 damage to it. So I mean, yes, it's not one-shotting enemy vehicles, but at 115 points it's not too pricey, and bringing 2 of them along to just focus their firepower and take out between them a big enemy tank or vehicle every turn is definitely a solid, worthwhile strategy. You really do want to be ganging up and bullying enemy units with a lot of the Drukhari stuff, I think, to make it really effective, and this is definitely a unit that you can do that with reasonably well. If you don't fancy the Dark Lances, the Disintegrator Cannon can be a pick instead. This nets you 3 strength 5, minus 2 AP, 2 damage shots each, so 9 in total if you swap them all out. Again, it's not an awful setup, it nets you around 3 dead marines from a volley, so great at taking out those smaller 5-man squads that may be sitting on an objective just to keep it in enemy hands. Now, I personally think the Riveger is better with Dark Lancers and just going after enemy armor and enemy vehicles. It's just a good unit to be sitting back in your deployments, maybe a couple of them, just as I said, to focus down enemy vehicles between them turn by turn by turn. And again, it's no Gladiator Lancer or Eldari Fire Prism, but for what the Drukhari Index has access to, I think it is a worthwhile pick for an army list. In the third spot in this list, we move from units and vehicles to characters, and one that is definitely worth taking in a Drukhari list is the Humble Archon. These guys have got some really strong synergies for another unit that you may want to bring, which is the Kabbalite Warriors. You probably will be bringing at least 1 squad of them if you're bringing an Archon just for the synergies they bring. An Archon joining a Kabbalite Warriors squad grants them reroll wound rolls of 1, and when they are empowered through your army rule, they get full rerolls to wound, which is a very nice buff for their weaponry. The Archon also has a super potent army ability in Devious Mastermind, and what this lets you do is, once per battle, after your opponent uses a stratagem, you can make it cost 1 command point more for the rest of the game. Now, this does only affect battle tactic stratagems as of the balanced data slate, which is a shame, but it is still a very strong ability, and it means that if your opponent uses a command point reroll, or Armor of Contempt, or Fields of Fire, or Hard as Nails, all of which are strats which are potentially being used several times over the game. Things like Armor of Contempt, I know Marine players pretty much use every single turn when they can, and so if you do it on the right stratagem, this can easily end up costing your opponent an extra 3 or 4 CP over the course of the battle, so it really does add up. Obviously, the first use of it they'll get for the normal cost, but if they are using it in turn 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that will add an extra 4 CP after the initial use to that stratagem over the course of the game, so it really does add up. I personally think that that ability alone almost makes the Archon's 75 point price tag worth paying for. He also has a relatively mediocre stat line. He's toughness 3 with 4 wounds, although he does hilariously still have his 2-up invulnerable save, which disappears the first time it's failed and you can't re-roll it. So that's one of those things where I've seen an Archon make 16 2-up saves to keep that save going across the entire game. Equally, I've seen it failed the first dice roll and just then the Archon got shot off the board pretty much straight away. It's one of those things that will either last all game long or you will just lose it straight away. But it can be quite useful just for adding that extra durability to him. On top of that, he also has some reasonable output in melee. He's got 5 strength 3 attacks at -2 AP and 2 damage, but it does have anti-infantry 3+, so he can put some hurt onto things like Marines. On average, he will kill about 2 Marines by himself, whilst if he's in a squad of 10 Cabalites, especially with those wound rerolls, they will likely kill off a few more. So if he is charged with his squad by a 5-man harassment squad or something, they will likely be able to fight them off and kill them off before they get tied up for too long by your opponent. All in all, I think the Archon is just a strong contender for your choice of army HQ. He brings a really nice buff to the warrior squad he'll join. He brings a very, very strong rule army-wide in Devious Mastermind. He's okay in terms of melee output, and he is also, as the cherry on top, also a pretty good pick for putting an enhancement on. Something like Labyrinthine Cunning can help you generate even more command points for your army, whilst he is still hindering the amount your enemy has. And that sort of command point interaction play in 10th edition can definitely swing the battle in your favour. So I think the Archon is a very good pick if you are looking for a leader or HQ option for your Drukhari list. Up next, we have a unit I think a lot of people probably expected to see, the monstrous unit of the Talos. These things are 90 points, or you can take them in a squad of 2 for 180, which I do highly recommend. In fact, 3 squads of 2 is definitely not a terrible idea for Drukhari armies right now. But for those 90 points, you get a 7-inch move monster who is toughness 7 with 7 wounds, protected by a reasonably healthy 3-up save and a mediocre 6-up invuln, but then the always incredibly powerful 5-up Feel No Pain. So they can actually take a surprising amount of punishment for their cost. Something like 20 bolt rifle shots will do just over 1 wound to them, and even bigger weapons like a las cannon with the Oath of Moment reroll to hit buff will still only do around 2 damage after those Feel No Pain saves, so it's really not too shabby at all things considered. But what makes the Talos really good is that after it's killed an enemy unit, it becomes empowered for the rest of the game. So not only does it then get reroll advances, reroll charges, and reroll hit rolls in both shooting and melee, but crucially in my opinion, it also means you don't have to spend your pain tokens on it, and you can now save that limited number of pain tokens that you have in your army for other units like your Ravagers or your Cabalite Warriors or your Scourges, so it gives you that little bit more economy for your army rule as well. In terms of their actual output themselves, they come with a twin Splinter Cannon and 2 macro Scalpels. The Splinter Cannon is a solid 3 anti-infantry shots, although it can be replaced by a Haywire Blaster, which again, for the anti-vehicle 4+ and devastating wounds and flat 3 damage, I really would, even just being 2 shots. The reroll wounds for twin linked means you can fish for those devastating wounds much more easily and really do a number against anything from light vehicles to even things like Terminators in a pinch. The twin Heat Lance is another option if you wanted some more dedicated anti-tank. Strength 14 with d6 damage and Melter 3 means that you can very easily chew through vehicles if you get within 9 inches. And then on the melee front, the macro Scalpels are 5 attacks at strength 7, -1 AP, 2 damage. One of them can be replaced by an Ichor Injector or a Liquefier Gun, and the other one can be replaced by Chain Flails or a Talos Gauntlet. The Chain Flails are 8 anti-infantry attacks at strength 6, 0 AP, 1 damage, whilst the Gauntlet is better in my opinion. It's a more brutal 5 attacks at strength 8, -2 AP and flat 3 damage. I think if I was bringing some Talos, my chosen build for all of them probably would be the Talos Gauntlet for my melee option, and then the twin Haywire for the gun, and replacing the other Scalpel with the twin Liquefier Gun. And what that does is it gives you a really solid melee profile, a good profile into vehicles with the Haywire, and then some good chaff clearing with the liquefier guns, which are d6 shots at strength 4 -1 AP, 1 damage with twin linked. All in all, it is just a very solid, very durable, reasonably fast moving platform that can perform very, very well at ranged and in melee, and that just gets even better by turn 2 or 3 after it's killed something and then becomes empowered. As I said, taking 3 squads of 2 for just 540 points is, in my opinion, very, very worth it. It gives you 3 separate, very serious threats to throw up the board that your opponent will have to deal with as soon as possible, or else end up finding a lot of their units being shot or punched off the board, or just tied up by 3 really quite durable units that are in their face by turn 2. Finally, in this list, we go to the battle line, and whilst the Kabbalite warriors are indeed good, and as I said, I probably would take at least one to make up part of your battle line choices, for me, I really like the small, min-sized squads of Raks. They are very, very cheap at just 12 points each, so an investment of just 60 points gets you a min squad, whilst comparatively the Kabbalite warriors, they will be setting you back 110 points minimum because they have to go in squads of 10 now. So if you wanted, if nothing else, a few squads of cheap objective holders, Raks are definitely the way to go. They are also toughness 4, which is a nice bonus in a Drukhari army, and whilst they only have a 6-up save and a 6-up invuln, they do actually also have that 5-up feel no pain, which is really significant and makes them at least somewhat durable against anti-infantry firepower. Against 0 AP guns, they can potentially have a 5-up armor save and that 5-up feel no pain, which means something like a 10-man Astra Militarum guard squad, an infantry squad, will on average only kill 1 Rak if they are in terrain, even whilst they are in rapid fire range. And, you know, that's not amazing. It's not like an infantry squad is the be all and end all of damage output, but it does mean they can be slightly more durable than something in a Drukhari army might initially seem to an opponent. And it does make them ever so slightly better at sort of holding and keeping those objectives, especially if they are near terrain, than your opponent might think. They also actually have a deceptive amount of output for their cost. They have Rak Blades base, which are just melee weapons with 2 attacks, hitting on 3s with anti-infantry 4+, so they hit on 3s, wound on 4s, but for each 5 in the squad, they can take a variety of guns. They can take a hex rifle, a liquefier gun, an ossifactor, and a stinger pistol, and each of those brings something useful to the unit. It allows them to do some anti-chaff firepower with the D6 strength 4 liquefier shots. It allows them to take pot shots at enemy leaders with the hex rifle's strength 6 -2 AP 3 damage with precision, and then they can even take some shots at armored opponents thanks to the ossifactor, which gives you -2 AP and 2 damage with anti-infantry 4+ and devastating wounds. So being able to potentially chunk 2 damage off a Terminator or outright kill a Marine with no saves thanks to devastating wounds is quite a nice surprise for someone that may not be expecting that from your cheap little 60-point squad. The final thing that I think makes them worth it in a competitive list is that for such a small investment, they also get an additional pain token when they kill a unit thanks to the Torturer's Craft, so that will get you 2 pain tokens because as far as I understand it, that's in addition to the base army rule, so whenever they kill an enemy unit, you'll get 2 pain tokens for that, but also when they die, they generate you a pain token then as well. So you will be getting a few extra tokens of your precious army resource by taking these guys, which is really, really important for the Drukhari, and I just think that this squad getting you extra ones for killing as well as getting one for dying means they really, really can help you to get the resource you need to buff your other more important units. To me, Raks are just cheap, deceptively okay in terms of their ranged output, and actually a very solid unit for interacting with your army rule. They just help to make the rest of your forces perform that much better on the battlefield. So whether you want them for holding home objectives, screening your other units and screening out enemy deep strikers, or just moving forward and daring the enemy to kill them to generate you some extra pain tokens, they do really have a place, and I think at least 2 squads, maybe even 3 squads is worth it in most Drukhari lists. So that is the Drukhari. As I said, yes, a lot of this stuff does pale in comparison to other armies, but I think the units here are worthwhile, and they do help to make a Drukhari list at least perform somewhat okay if you wanted to play in a semi-competitive setting. You get some solid ranged output, you get some very good distraction carnifexes if nothing else in the Talos, and then you get some good objective holding units in the racks. But as always, I would love to know what you think and what some of your favourite units are from the Drukhari Index. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.